Good evening. This is Marie Clarner, Chairman of the North Attleborough Planning Board. I'm really happy all of you could join us today as we begin to work on a housing production plan for North Attleborough. This is the first time that North Attleborough will have one. I'm really happy that we're getting around to this. And I'm going to ask the members of the Master Plan Committee that are here if you would introduce yourselves, please. Laurel?
Good evening, I'm Laurel Racine.
Bill?
Evening, Bill Blaze.
And Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Ryan.
Thank you. Anybody else want to introduce themselves, or you all just want to hang on mute and listen? I guess we're going to hang on mute and listen. Okay, back to you, Eric.
Great, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Great. My name, as Marie said, I'm Eric. I'm with Serpent. I'm here tonight joined by two of my colleagues, Sarah Brown and Taylor Perez, and they'll be here to answer any questions that you have. If you have a question, you can just raise your hand. It's pretty informal. It's not a huge group of people, or you can put it in the chat and they'll respond to it if you have any questions about this or the master planning process in general. So Serped, many of the people I've seen many of these people before, but we haven't seen you, Serped, Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. We're a regional planning agency based in Taunton. And as you can see, we're working from home here. We have been, as most folks have for quite some time. But we've continued on with master planning and planning in general, and we're working with North Attleborough not only on a master plan, which I've seen many of you folks at different functions, and this is a housing production plan. It's a plan specifically focused on housing. And SERPED, my agency, our agency, was retained to help the town develop their housing production plan. So I'm going to share my screen. We have a short presentation with some information on it, and then we're going to ask some questions, and we have a few activities for you folks to do. So we're going to be trying to be respectful of the time, try to get everybody out by 8. But if there's lingering conversations, that's okay too. So if you bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see a aerial view of North Attleborough? Okay, I see a lot of folks shaking their head yes. Great. So this is the housing production plan workshop number 1. We're going to talk about some of the housing needs in the town based on some of the data we've gathered and some of the information we've heard. And we'll also talk about some goals tonight. So introduction. So as I kind of went over that a little bit of who we are and why we're here. We've started this process, a master plan process, run about 18 months. And as part of it, like I said, we're doing a housing production plan, which I'll explain a bit more in a little bit. Discovery workshop, we had that back in February. Those were via Zoom. We had them on 2 nights and got some good number of folks participating. And then in April, we had another 2 nights of workshops talking about land use, housing, and economic development. Tonight, you can see we're starred. We're at the housing production plan workshop number one. Instead of saying housing production plan workshop, because we're a government agency, we call them HPPs. It's a little easier than housing production plan, but so you may hear me use either term. And we'll have a second housing production plan workshop at the end of the summer, sometime in August. We haven't scheduled it yet. And then ideally the plan will be wrapped up in September, October-ish, as the master plan is ongoing. So the basics, what is a housing production plan? So an HPP, as I'll call it, it's a community's proactive strategy for planning and developing affordable housing. It's developed with folks to participate, such as we're doing here tonight, residents and stakeholders. We have this meeting here tonight. We'll have another one in August. We have information up on our website where you can give your ideas and thoughts on housing in town. But it really focuses on creating a plan for the town to develop additional affordable housing in their community. So key components of a housing production plan. So housing production plan basically consists of 3 elements or sections, we call them. There's a housing needs assessment. So what we do is we go through a variety of data sources. We want to understand who's living there, the demographics, the people that are living there. We want to know what types of housing is there. And then we're also looking at, are there any constraints to developing housing? We'll talk about that a little bit. So we want to know who's living in town, what kind of houses there are in town, and are there any constraints or hindrances to developing housing in town? So once we do that, we talk about goals. What are the town's goals? What does the town want to do for affordable housing? What kind of housing do they want in town? Do they want it ownership units or rental units, or single family or multifamily or condos or what have you? Or should it be for certain populations, for the elderly? Or should we make more family housing or folks with special needs, that sort of thing? And lastly, once we have identified the goals, we help the town develop or identify implementation strategies. How are we going to implement these goals? How are we going to make these goals become a reality? So those are the 3 parts of a housing production plan. So a common question is, why should we do one? We're doing a master plan, which will have a housing element in it. We'll talk about housing, but a housing production plan is its own standalone plan. So HPPs, or housing production plans, they give communities that are under the 10% threshold of Chapter 40B. I'll talk about that in a moment. But if they're making progress, they have the ability, if they develop a certain number of housing units in a year or 2-year basis, they would have the ability to deny a comprehensive permit. It gives them more control over the 40B process. And I can answer questions about 40B, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. And secondly, it ensures adequate housing and equity in town. Safe, accessible, affordable housing promotes equity and opportunity for all members of the community. There's a good quote here that my colleague Taylor Perez found from the Stanford Social Review. High quality, stable housing is central to the health and well-being of all families. It helps fosters relationships and opportunities in communities, limits chronic stress, and allows families to support positive child development. So having housing, if you're not worried about your housing all the time, your well-being is dramatically improved. Additionally, the Commonwealth has a commitment to housing. You may have heard the Baker-Polito administration's Housing Choice Initiative, I think announced back in 2017. They had a commitment to develop or produce 135,000 new housing units statewide. Not affordable housing units, although many of them are affordable, but there's such a housing crunch. I'm sure if anybody has looked at the papers or knows of anybody buying or selling a house, the prices and the demand is far outpacing the supply. So the administration in the state has made a commitment to try to produce housing as quickly and as fast as it can. They've offered a couple of grant programs to help with infrastructure construction. There's a number of technical assistance programs to help towns develop housing. And again, since each town, it's a home rule community, the state can't mandate where housing goes. There might be what they do in other counties or other states, but Massachusetts, each town has the ability to determine their own zoning. So the state's trying to encourage it, encourage the development of housing. I should note that we're going to have this presentation up on our website afterwards, so you can come in and kind of view it as you wish, and you can kind of dig into it a little bit more. We have some key terms here, as what is, we call it a capital A affordable versus lowercase. Affordable housing is in 2 ways. So a lowercase affordable housing is basically housing that is not subsidized. It's naturally occurring affordable housing, which these days is far and few between. There's not a lot of just lower price housing on the market, either be it for sale or for rent. Affordable, what we call capital A affordable housing, is housing that's subsidized by a public agency, a nonprofit, and it's limited to households with incomes who have 80% of the area median income for the particular area. And it's also deed restricted, usually at a minimum 30 years, but usually in perpetuity. So only in perpetuity, people who have 80% of that area median income can live there. And there's a bunch of rules and regulations that is checked on a regular basis. I'll just mention area median income. And what that is, it's a metric from HUD, the US Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's basically the midpoint of a region's household income. And it's a pretty standard way to measure income. And that's what the state uses to determine, what's affordable. Most people have heard of Chapter 40B and a comprehensive permit. 40B has been around since 1969. And it allows developers, if you don't have 10% of your housing capital A affordable, developers can come and override local zoning and construct housing, regardless of what the local zoning says. So it sometimes has a negative connotation. It's developed a lot of affordable housing in town, and agree with it or not, it's the law right now, and it's been on the books for 52 years. So it's the largest driver of creating affordable housing in the state. So there's some other terms here, housing production plan. It'll be approved through that. We'll work with the master plan committee. We'll work with members of the public in these exercises. And eventually this plan will need to be approved by the planning board in town and the town council. Then it gets sent to the state for approval. And it's good for 5 years. It has a shelf life of 5 years. Before we move on, did anybody have any questions so far? I know it's a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you. We'll hear from you folks, and that's what we want to do in a minute. I'm just kind of setting the table, if you will. So when we do
Hi,
ask
Eric.
some questions. Yes.
This is Juliana. I had a question. Will you be covering statistics about relating to the percentages in the categories that you described between the median income and the percent of housing we have and that sort of thing?
We're going to be talking some demographics in a quick second. And if it's not there, we can get it for you if the
Okay.
information you're looking for. Yep.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So we had a master plan survey, which a lot of people took. We had 860 responses. So a few of those questions, what type of housing should be encouraged in North Attleborough? And we gave folks choices. So there's still a large demand for single family, large lot houses, but we also saw a lot of demand for smaller lot houses, townhouses, duplexes, condominiums, that sort of thing. So it's just not exclusively single family housing. The town's looking for a mix of different types of housing, although single family, large lot is still the preferred medium, but not by a lot. Other answers we heard, 55 plus housing, affordable housing, and reuse of other structures. We also asked folks, do you find that there are enough affordable housing options in North Attleborough? About 40% of the people said yes, but the rest were not sure. So the majority of people either said no, there are not, or no, I'm not sure because I don't understand what affordable housing is. And that's a kind of a common misconception. It can be very confusing. So we're hopefully here tonight to help demystify affordable housing. So some data behind housing in North Attleborough. So here's the data part. So first we look at populations and age trends. We want to know who's living here. So you can see the population in North Attleborough, 1990 to 2000, it was growing at a pretty good clip throughout the 2000s, exceeding the state and the county, but it's slowed in recent years, whereas actually Massachusetts has a higher rate of growth. Age trends, and we can see that, and this is not uncommon to North Attleborough, is that the number of retirement age people, 60 plus we categorize them as, is increasing. In 2000, it was 13% of the folks. Now it's 20% of the folks. And that's a trend we expect to continue as the baby boomers age. People have smaller families, that sort of thing. So we see a decrease in the school age children and an increase in the retirement age children. Household trends, we can see that the household size has increased slightly over the past almost 20 years. Although, again, coming back to this point, The number of households with a person 65 plus went from 18% to 25%. The number of households with children under 18 decreased slightly. And the number of single person households is about 15%. And of those 15%, almost half are folks who are 65 plus. So if you live alone, about half those people who live alone are 65 plus. So this helps us get a sense of, okay, this is what the people who are living here, is there enough housing for these people? We also look at income, because that's a critical number. So we see North Attleborough's median household income was just about $93,000 in 2019, which far exceeds the county as well as the state that did back in 2010 as well. So compared to those, North Attleborough is relatively affluent. So this is an interesting thing. So housing affordability. So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, they have a metric, what they considered folks, if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, you considered cost burdened. So they have this data for North Attleborough, and they divide it up between folks who own their home and folks who rent their home. So they can see that folks who are cost burdened, spending between 30 and 50% of their income on rent or mortgage, and then they categorize severely cost burden if you're spending more than 50% of your income on your housing. For owners, you can see about 13% of people are cost burdened, and about 9% are severely cost burdened. In other words, about a quarter of the folks in North Attleborough who own a house are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, which allows less for other things. They probably be working more and that sort of thing. For renters, it's even more. It's almost 30% of the folks who rent are paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs. About half of them are, about 15% of the folks who rent are paying more than 50% of their income on housing costs. So the subsidized housing inventory, and I mentioned earlier the 10% number. The state mandates that every town needs to have 10% of their housing as affordable, that capital A, subsidized. And if you don't have that 10%, a developer can come in and override your local zoning. North Attleborough right now is at 3.1%. There's 11,553 units in town. 354 are subsidized. That's about 3%. You can see you're below your neighbors. Mansfield's over 10%, Attleborough's about 6%, and Plainville has almost 17% of their housing that's subsidized.
Eric, before you move on, this is Juliana. Could you explain that comment? Because we're at 3% below the 10, did you just say that means a developer can do, quote, whatever they want?
They can come in and override local zoning. So if they see a parcel of land that is zoned single family residential with a 30,000 square foot minimum lot size, they could say, okay, we're actually going to build something. We're going to put a 100-unit condo complex on this 3-acre parcel. And it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who oversees that process. And there's negotiations, but the Zoning Board of Appeals can't outright deny that application just because they don't like it. There has to be a very substantive reason as to why the town rejects that. The state sees that. You can appeal it through the Housing Appeals Court and whatnot, but the state, in experience, mostly sides with the developers. They see the need for affordable housing outweighing people just not liking it or not wanting it. There has to be a real substantive reason as to why the developer won't be able to do that. There's a process that developers go through. They have to get financing and subsidies, and it goes through the Department of Housing and Community Development. So they have to work with the state. So it's just not a fly-by-night type of a thing. It's vetted
Right.
to a great degree. But
Thank
yes,
you.
yep. Hopefully that answered your question. Did anybody else have any questions? So we also look at your housing stock. So we can see, looking back, You can actually click on these and anywhere we can see how many housing units were built during different decades. So we can see about 60% of the housing stock in North Attleborough is more than 40 years old, which is not uncommon. You can see, it really between the 80s and 70s, there was a building boom in North Attleborough, coinciding with 495, and even in the 60s, but more so the 70s and 80s, a lot of housing built in North Attleborough, and it's kind of tailed off in recent years, which again, kind of goes back to the population increase. 70s and 80s, a lot of population. There was a population boom in North Attleborough. It's kind of quieted down in recent years. But there are also a fair amount of older homes. About 21% of the houses are more than 80 years old, which, again, the older the house, the more upkeep, the more maintenance it needs versus a newer home. So, those houses might be cheaper sometimes, but they also have a lot of other needs, if you will. Housing tenure. And what we mean by tenure, that's people who own houses versus who rent houses. Like what's the percentage of owners versus renters? So we can see in 2019, about 32% of the folks rented, and about 67 own their own home. This looks very similar, but if you scroll over it, it's increased towards the rental. There are more rental housing units coming online, more construction of rental units coming online rather than single families. I know 21 East is coming online, so that, and if other rentals will come online, that'll kind of, you'll see more, that percentage increase towards rentals. But basically it's 2/3 are owner occupied versus renter occupied.
Will those new rental units affect affordability?
No, that wasn't developed under a comprehensive permit. No, so I don't know how many units were there. How many units, Marie?
193 units.
193, and none of them are subsidized.
10% are affordable, I thought. None?
No.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Somehow I thought we had inclusionary zoning funding from the street. We don't have any of that? Okay.
You're on mute, Marie. Still on mute.
That's one of the reasons why we're going through this, to doing the master plan and doing the housing production plan, to help guide us towards looking at some zoning so that we can provide for more affordable housing and more a greater variety of housing as well. But I was not on the planning board when 21 East Street was approved. I remember thinking the same thing you did. I thought that there was a certain percentage that was affordable, but I was informed later that it's all market rate.
Okay, so yeah, when developers come in and do that, usually, it can be subsidized, and a development like that usually tends to be affordable. Doesn't always necessarily have to be, but some of those units would be subsidized and go towards your SHI number there, that 10%. We also looked, this is something new we kind of looked at, we also looked at different mortgage applications, different indicators than we usually look at, mortgage trends. And we can see, how many people in town have applied for a mortgage. We can see, kind of hit the peak, looking at the numbers here. It dropped, during the Great Recession, 2008-9. It really peaked in 2012, kind of petered off a little bit, and then increased. So about 2,000 folks have applications, total mortgage applications in 2020. So a number that we expect to probably only increase given how hot the market is. Mortgage approval rates, we also look at this. Folks, you can kind of see it's been pretty steady. Between 50 and 60% of applications have been approved in town over time, and this data all comes from the federal government Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, where you can look at any particular town. Obviously, we're looking at North Attleborough. Yeah. home sale trends. This is always interesting. And so we'll look at single family, 2-family, 3-family condos, and you can see there that the prices since the Great Recession have steadily increased. None more so than 3 families. You can see that's that lime green kind of color, and that's increased quite a great deal. And right now, as of 2020, the median home sales price is about $395,000. Again, that was 2020. 2021, I'm sure the number will be more. 2-family was about 380. 3-family was about 445. And again, that's the median. So that's the middle, the median. Obviously, there are outliers on all sides, but again, that's a number. A year from now, we'd expect to see quite a dramatic increase from those numbers. We'll also look at cash sales. These are usually placed by investors. Folks, they come in and buy it straight cash throughout the condominiums. A buying environment with a high presence of cash sales may make it difficult for traditional home buyers to do that. So about roughly 16% of sales didn't have a mortgage. They were just bought in cash. We're not sure if it's bought by a developer. That usually tends to be it. Sometimes they're bought by families or whatnot. So before we move to the next section of our event tonight, did anybody have any questions? Is there any other data you'd like to see? I'm sure we can grab that. Did you have any questions about the data we have? Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, just an observation. A while ago, we talked about 101 East Street having an effect or not having an effect on the affordability rate. I actually see it bringing the affordability rate down because we don't have more affordable housing here and in the pipeline, but we have regular housing, market housing, and so the moving target is moved down. So our 3.1 is going to be less. I'm not sure how much less. Will it go down past 3?
Well, that number will change, that 3.1%. You make a good point, Dan, because it's based on that kind of your denominator is based on your year-round housing units and 2010. It's using 2010 numbers. The 2020 numbers will come out and it'll be more than 11,500 units or whatever it was. So your 3.19% is most likely going to go below 3% because you're developing housing and none of it is subsidized. So you'll fall under that mark. Ideally, you'd want to, when you're developing something, this is where like an inclusionary zoning bylaw, if a person's going to build 100 units, you'd want at least 10% of them affordable to kind of stay with that pace, that, keep that 10% pace. And the town hasn't done that in the past. So now they kind of play a little catch up, if you will. But that number will probably drop below 3%, probably in the 2s somewhere. I don't know the number, but yeah, if I was expecting it, I'd expect it to be a little below 2.
So
below 3. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to ask one more question on rentals. My experience had been that if the builder built rentals and 25% of those rentals were affordable, then the entire amount could be counted as affordable. Is that still?
That's correct. So if you say you 21 East Street and it was 193 units, and if it went through the the 40B process and 25% of them were affordable, or we'll say 50,
right.
50 were affordable, then all would count. All 193 would count towards being affordable. You'll say, well,
huge difference.
Yeah, you'll say, why is that? Well, the incentive to do that was for folks or for developers to build rental housing. That's why they do that. They give them credit. If it were single family, if you're going to build 193 single family homes, all the 25% that were affordable, only those would count on the housing inventory. Only 50 would count. So it's the incentive to build apartments or multifamily housing because they weren't building it. So that's an incentive for folks for developers to build it.
I had a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure. Who is it?
This is Ken.
Okay. Hey, Ken.
Everest. Hey. That percentage, does that include people who are taking advantage and using the home-based programs or Section 8 housing, for 3 families, 4 families, things like that, like regular multifamilies that we see downtown?
It only counts if they're subsidized. So if they are, I know there's like Section 8 vouchers that kind of bounce around, things like that. I don't have the town's subsidized housing inventory with me. The state publishes a list of all the developments in every town in the state, and you can say, oh, 23 Jones Street, 4 units are affordable or whatnot. So it usually counts the particular developments. And usually, I could be mistaken, Marie or Bill or somebody here, usually the housing authority has an eye on those, if I'm not mistaken, and all housing authority properties are counted on the housing inventory.
Okay, yeah, that 3% number, I feel like it's really open to interpretation based on what you just kind of pointed to that point that it does bounce around a lot. People are on, people off. So if that counts, if someone rents a unit, wherever it is, in a development or a 3-family or a 4-family, if they're using that for a couple of years and go off of it, but then go back on it, is that counting into the 3% that we're talking about? Because I don't see how it could accurately represent the amount of affordable housing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Ken. My understanding of it is that you have a particular, hold on one second, Ken. Taylor or Sarah, do you have the subsidized housing inventory for North Attleborough?
I can, whatever, we'll both look for it, see what we can find.
Yeah, okay. I can bring it up so I can share it with you. It's all public information. So my understanding of it is those particular units, like be it the housing authority, they have, I forget the name of the development, but the small developments of senior housing in town. Most towns have some type of housing authority. So those 75 units are listed on there. You have another development, let's just say for the sake of argument, the 21 East Street. So that would be, 193 units. That would be on the inventory. It doesn't include those types of Section 8 type of things because they do move around.
Can I address that?
I'm sorry, who am I looking at? Dan?
Dan, I'm the director of the Housing Authority.
Oh, okay, Dan, sorry. You would know that more than I. I didn't, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So the easy answer, anything that is not subsidized directly to the owner and has market rate is not considered affordable housing. So market rate for a Section 8 tenant that moves from one place to another, for example, never counts for affordable housing. But the project-based Section 8, like we have 12 here in town, those are part of the subsidized because the people who move in don't realize the subsidy they can take with them. It's part of the property. Like Chapter 40B, those subsidies are part of the property. And subsidies can be dollars or lessening of regulations. So if you want an inventory of the elderly housing, we have 104 single elderly units at Circle Court. We have 50 at South Washington. We have 72 at Elm Terrace. In addition to that, we have family units, 20 that are veterans. 20 that are special, 200 programs, which is a different program, and then 12 that are family, also veterans. The Section 8 that I just mentioned are for disabled families. Quite frankly, I want to interject, I see the need for disabled family units in the town. That's our list.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. My apologies.
No problem.
Okay. Here is the subsidized housing inventory for North Attleborough, and you can see there's a number of different units here. They're all in perpetuity. You can see a number of them are with Dan in his the Housing Authority. We also see that the Department of Developmental Services and DMH, Department of Mental Health, they have group homes throughout the area. And that's very common in most towns. I don't even know where they are, it's confidential. But those units count on the subsidized housing inventory, and they'll change from time to time. You can see majority are rental. There's only 4 that are ownership. So as you can see, we have the number 354, and when you divide it by that year-round housing units, 11,553, that's where you get your 3.06%. So the Department of Housing and Community Development keeps a list like this for every community in the state, and it changes as developments, obviously go on.
So using those numbers to get to the 10%, the town needs 800 more affordable units.
Approximately. Well, that might seem like, oh my God, we're never going to reach it. But there is that, when you develop a housing production plan, and if you develop either 0.5% or 1% of those units in a period of time, you can have your plan certified. And that means you have like a 1 or 2 year window where you have the opportunity to deny a 40B that might not fit with the character of the community. So that's kind of an incentive to develop affordable housing production plan. It's good planning practice to develop a housing production plan, and B, there's an incentive for towns to do that. If you're making progress towards that, the state will certify your plan and give the town the ability to deny 40Bs that might not fit with the character of the community over a 1 or 2 year period. So. Right. Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen again. I lost the.
And just if folks are curious, I did place that PDF in the chat, so you can access it readily.
Yeah, it's all public information, so anybody can access it. Department of Housing and Community Development keeps a list, and I'm sure if you reach out to them, they're more than happy to do it. They update it from time to time whenever you're asked for it. That's usually when they try to keep it up to date. Did anybody else have any other questions? So
Eric, it's Ken again here. Sorry to bug you.
Yeah.
I got to go.
No.
I got to put the kids to bed. I appreciate you guys doing this. This is really nice to see all this information. I'm going to watch the recording later. Are you available for questions?
Absolutely.
Via email?
For sure.
I saw email on the invite. So I don't know if that was you or if that was Marie or Taylor or whoever.
Yeah, just send it to that and one of us will get to it. So yeah, I know I got kids too. My wife's watching them. But so we have this recording. You'll be able to put it up. You'll be able to watch it. And if you have any questions after the fact, or if you forget something, shoot us an email. We'll get right back to you. And if you want to set up a call or something, we could do that too. Just like a one-on-one or something.
The recording, it'll be on...
It'll be on the project website, and we'll post it on the Facebook page too.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Night.
Good night.
Night. Anybody else have any questions? Probably have more. So get a quick cost burden exercise. We talked about cost burden. Households cost burden if it pays more than 30% of its income on housing, and severely cost burden if it pays 50%. When I talk about housing, it's the mortgage payments, utilities, that sort of stuff. So we'll just say an instance for a renter who's paying $1,500 a month in rent and $200 a month in utilities. And let's say that they make $48,000 a year. So they're paying about 42% of their income on housing. So $1,500 a month, a couple $100 in utilities. You're making about $48,000 a year. That's about 42% of your income is going towards your housing costs. A renter, let's just say, again, a person who has a mortgage, say they have a $2,200 a month mortgage, another $200 in utilities, and say they make $84,000 or $85,000 a year. That's about 30% of their income. And both those folks would be considered cost burden. So it's just to think about your situation. I don't want to know how much you make and how much you and how much you pay in mortgage and stuff, but it's just an exercise to kind of to get you thinking of how much you pay in your mortgage, and are you cost burdened? I could say when I bought my first house, I was definitely cost burdened. I was probably eating. Me and my wife, we bought it right in 2007, right before the market collapsed, and yeah, we were eating pretty basic meals for quite a while, not going out to eat. But obviously, times have changed. But yeah, it's tough, especially for young families, older folks, especially with the recent pandemic. A lot of folks, have been hurt quite a bit by that. But it's just an idea to get folks thinking of are you cost burdened? Do you know people who are cost burdened? There are a lot of people out there who are probably cost burdened in town, as we saw, about 25% of homeowners and about 30% of renters. So just something to keep in mind. So have a couple of discussion questions. We'll kind of throw it on the floor here. So what populations in town have the greatest needs? And what are the needs, and what can be done about them? Where do you envision the future housing in North Attleborough located? More starter homes, multifamilies, mid-size, affordable, and are there areas that aren't suitable for housing in town? It's basically just an open discussion, talking about housing. We kind of know who lives here based on our demographics, but SERPED is acting as the administrative assistant to this, and as you folks are the experts in North Attleborough. You've heard enough from me tonight, and we want to hear from you now as to what you think and what you know. You folks are on the ground. We come here for meetings, we study the data and the facts, but we're not there in town.
Eric, before we kind of deep dive, do you think it'd be worth it? Sorry if you hear my dog chewing on a bone in the background. Sarah can share that mapping exercise on the screen, and then maybe we could just get like a sticky note of these discussion questions up on the side, so we can use that to kind of go in tandem.
Sarah, take it away. You can drive, Sarah. There you go.
Okay, so here's our mapping exercise that we're using from the previous land use, housing, and economic development workshop. And we would like you guys to continue to add housing points to the map, as well as the other points for land use and economic development. But for this workshop, we're going to focus on housing. And we have some comments already in this map. And then it looks like people have already started liking these comments. So while we discuss this, you guys can feel free to speak out, and I can add comments as we go, or afterwards this will be on our website and you can go and add comments. So does anybody want to start?
Yeah, any of the questions I mentioned, what do people think the greatest housing need is in North Attleborough? Is it more single families? There's no right or wrong answer here. We're just trying to get a sense from the town. What are the housing needs in North Attleborough? We have an idea by looking at the data, but again, we're not there. We're not talking to neighbors. You folks have a better idea.
Eric, this is Juliana. What I was struggling with as I looked at this is the overlay of the census data, more finely detailed by portions of the town, so that you could say, well, the downtown area, or Falls or North or South, whatever area, we've got percentages of poverty in those areas. Therefore, to me, it kind of says maybe there needs to be either more intensity there, or conversely, we say, gee, there's already a lot of affordable housing in that area where there are low income, and we need to move it somewhere else. So that was one of my struggles, was kind of trying to fit the demographics and the income and such to the map and the policy or the goals.
Okay, so you'd like to know where the concentration of affordable housing is, just to get a sense of where it is in town?
And the population characteristics, where earlier we were talking about the percentage of, for example, the renters, those that are burdened. So those that are more than 30% of their income, where are those people living?
Yeah.
That was kind of my struggle.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just don't know enough. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't know enough.
I don't know where they live. So we just get these kind of broad-based numbers. I know, obviously I know where the people who are in that subsidized housing inventory live. If they're in a housing authority or whatever that is, I know that those folks, we know where they live. And the, people who own their own home and just happen to be cost burden, I don't know where they live. It doesn't match up. Dan, you want to say something?
Yeah, we can see a lot of the cost burden elders and small families in the mobile homes still.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to comment here is we have a large number of elderly and handicapped applicants for the housing authority for the local. I see the need for handicapped apartments, and I talk about rentals for handicap because a lot of time handicapped families are a temporary measure. Families grow, change, and then the unit is no longer available, useful to the family because the handicapped person has graduated, moved on, or other things have happened. So I point to rentals for that. As I mentioned, there are a lot of elder homes that could use minor rehab. So going for the CDBG grants for homeowner grants for rehab would allow those people to stay in their home with anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000 of code compliance correction and maybe a convenience, adding a bit for a ramp for someone who's disabled to get upstairs. Those are the successes that I've seen in different towns around. Sadly, this town, the income in this town is so high that CDBG first round is not available to us. Second round is, and that is a difficult grant to get.
Yeah, I've seen other towns that do that. I don't know, it's North Attleborough do it? I'd have to look into Attleborough because I know towns partner with other ones.
I don't see that, no.
No, okay. So that kind of goes back to the point of, there are a fair amount of older homes in town that need updating, and for older folks live in them, they just don't have the money to replace the furnace or to make whatever code issues they have to keep it up. And sometimes they're forced out. And also, another good point Dan made was there are a fair amount of mobile homes in town that it's cheap. It's cheaper housing where you can buy a place and live there at a lower cost.
The sad part about mobile homes is that they do not count in the affordable housing.
Correct.
I had posted a couple of articles on Facebook about sustainability and net zero building, and particularly for affordable housing. And it seems to be something that we can't ignore and should, include in our vision.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I've seen the articles that you posted. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you. But yeah, it's something that it's not going away. Affordable housing developers, and they may have overlooked. Plainville, your neighbor has 17%. I'm not sure why they have 17, and you folks have 3. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but there's such a need for it, and it'll most likely be coming. As I think Marie said, you had a couple of 40Bs on the docket, or developers expressing some interest. North Attleborough is a very nice town. It also has infrastructure, and that's what a lot of developers like to see: water, sewer, that sort of thing.
I think maybe I wasn't clear. I mean, as far as like net zero building and that type of thing, I think that's incredibly important, and I think we've kind of missed the boat on requiring more sustainable building.
Okay,
and
like LEED certified type buildings and things like that.
Well, solar, built so that it's more environmentally friendly.
Okay, I got you.
Eric?
Yes.
Lisa, thanks for the suggestion about solar. A lot of people have brought that up in the past couple of years The interesting thing in North Attleborough is that since we have our own electric department, in general, it is not cost effective for someone to add solar panels. And the town did that study on the landfill a few years ago. They were talking about trying to put solar panels there. There have been very few solar projects in town in the past few years. And I don't think you're going to see too many because of the low cost of North Attleborough Electric compared to National Grid and Eversource. I also wanted to go back to what Juliana was saying. I think in terms of cost burdened families or housing, I think, to be honest with you, other than a very few specific neighborhoods, I think cost burdened families are in a lot of areas of town. I live in one of the older sections of town. My house was built in 1794, but and a lot of the houses near me are older, but luckily most of them have been updated or maintained or redone or whatever. But I know of families, because I was in the school department for so long, in many areas of town. I don't think you would find that the cost burden families are concentrated in one area over the other. This is a topic that has been important to me for a long time. I had students who lived at the Pineapple Inn, and I think that, and I know families still live there. I think it's really important that we try and do the best we can when developers come to town and are interested in developing affordable housing units, that we try and work with them until we get some criteria established. It's a lot easier, I think, to work with somebody than against somebody and try and perhaps reuse one of the old, there's some discussion about reusing some of the old dilapidated factory buildings and rehabbing them or tearing them down and starting anew. But that has been an interest for more than one person who has come to talk to the town within the past year. So I hope truly that those work out.
Marie, I read recently that we received a $500,000 grant to clean up a former pig farm. Do you know anything about that property?
Yeah, that's the Courtois. It used to be the Courtois Sand and Gravel Pit, and a long time ago it was a pig farm. It's down in on Mendon Road in North Attleborough, down the southern end of town. It abuts the Cumberland line. The town got a grant a number of years ago and did a cleanup on another portion of the property. This is the remaining portion that needs to be cleaned up. That's primarily petroleum and fuel issues. So that will take care of that. There have been, the town's been approached by people in the past who are interested in doing projects there, but they wanted to make sure that it was clean. Nobody wants to acquire a property that's got a material issue. So I think once that cleanup is done, that you will see something forward for there.
Would that be an appropriate affordable housing location?
We've talked about all kinds of things from an affordable housing location to, depending on how much land is actually developable. We talked about, I had done some reading about some developments in another part of the country that had affordable housing, but it wasn't, what we have generally considered to be affordable housing. It had different types of housing. So then on one section of the property, there might have been apartments for younger people who were starting out or newly married or single or whatever. And then another section of the property that was more of a townhouse effect for young families. And then another section of the property that was condos or apartments for senior citizens who were downsizing. Because that's one of the things that has been brought up to us many times, is that senior citizens in town who don't want to leave North Attleborough, but they don't want to maintain the big house they've had all these years, there's nowhere for them to go unless they go to a mobile home park, and they don't want to do that. We were looking at a mixture of different things. I don't know what will happen there, but I think the town's pretty open for discussions about what can go there.
That's, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
And just one of the things I wanted to mention is, as I've been reviewing that property with different people, it's prime for mixed use in different ways. And by mixed use, I actually mean more than just a little convenience store.
I don't know where that came from, but that was, when we talked about that from a mixed use standpoint,
Yeah.
we talked about it from the standpoint, I'll give you an example. Like the one up in Rentham on Route 1, where the 110 Grill is and the Aviva Italian restaurant, there's restaurants, there's,
That's a lot.
I know that's a lot, but I'm saying that's a mixture of all kinds of different things. When we were talking about mixed use, we were not talking about a little convenience store plopped in the middle, no.
What were you thinking about?
Apartments, condos, possibly some area within the complex where you could get something to eat, get a coffee, have a playground, sit outside, a wide variety of things. Again, as I said, it depends on the land and what the land's going to accommodate. I'm not an architect, so I couldn't tell you what can go there, what can't go there. There's also no sewer there yet, so that's another issue that needs to be addressed.
The vision you just described is where I was going with this. We don't want something big and ostracized, but something nice and communal for that community.
Right.
Within a walk-in, when I say convenience store, it could be a coffee shop, could be anything that's convenient for the people there.
Right.
Following up on that, there any other places in town? I know there's not a ton of town-owned land hanging around, but any other places where that might be a fit? And kind of a larger discussion, what types of housing is needed in town? Dan mentioned, folks, more apartments for handicap and elderly folks. Is there a need for additional condos, 2 families, 3 families? Where should they be? Should they be out in, probably not in the western part of town where there's no services? Usually you probably want to put development where other development is. But
It
again,
seems like
This is,
like Route 1.
who wants to go first? We'll pick Juliana.
oh, hi, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
or talk over. I want to go back to the previous comment on, I really see it as important to sort of create the village. And I think for that to happen, I like the ideas that Dan and Marie were talking about in terms of the mixed use, but I think it actually has to have more than just, a coffee shop. To your point just now, Eric, their transportation is likely to be an issue. So there's got to be either delivery services or, a slightly larger grocery store so that people, and, maybe a little hardware store. You need some sort of capability that enables people to stay sort of in that area for the most part, I think. And I like the idea. So it seems we're kind of mixing the goals and where would they be. So for me, I like the goal of we have to handle elderly, disabled, young families coming in are sort of as 3 priorities, it seems I'm hearing and I'm seeing in the comment section here, so that there are others obviously, but maybe those become our 3. Certainly veterans, yes, so I don't know, but maybe we need the list of here are all the populations we could possibly serve. And then maybe there's some sort of prioritization of those to help us identify the goals.
And that'll be the next workshop. We'll, based on the
Oh,
information that we
okay.
get based on the information we get from this, we'll have another workshop later in the summertime. We'll have a big discussion on, what it is. We're trying to figure out, what again, we have somewhat of an idea, but again, want to hear what you folks have to say. That's a great point.
It seems like the ideal place would be along Route 1, where they would have access to a lot of stores and
Services and stuff.
be reimagined. And if it could be kind of plugged into some type of an electric transportation system, that we could maybe envision for bringing people to downtown or to the train stations or
No, that's a good point. It'll be interesting. I don't have any information, and Marie can chime in that Route 1 has a lot of big box stores, and with the advent of online shopping, and even more so during the pandemic, a lot of these have kind of gone away, and I don't know if that'll continue to be the case, but you might have more opportunities. Obviously, you'd have to be zoned for that and whatnot, but there could be definitely some reimagining of where this might go.
One of the things that needs to be addressed is when we talk about, doing this on Route 1 or downtown or out on the Courtois property, the town does not have a mixed use zoning bylaw. We don't have an overlay district that allows for it. If you go downtown, I mean, granted, almost all the properties are stores on the ground floor level, and upstairs is either apartments or offices. But that's just sort of what happened back when those were built. That wasn't by zoning. So one of the things I think we need to take a look at is, do you want to have, mixed use overlay districts? Do you want, what kind of bylaws do you want to have? What guidance do you want to offer to people? I think that we want to try and make sure that we have something in place so that if someone, I'm going to tiptoe around this one kind of carefully. There was an item in the news today about a mall in New England where the Sears store had closed, if that sounds familiar, but I'm not talking about North Attleborough. And, the mall owner turned part of it into housing, part of it into a green space, and opened additional restaurants. And quite honestly, that's the kind of conversation that we've been having for a while. But once again, that's commercially zoned property. We would need to have a mixed use, either overlay district or whatever, to have the ability to do that. And to my mind, sooner than later would be a good idea. That's just me.
So
how can that happen?
Well, as I said when I began, that when we started this whole process of talking to SERPID about a housing production plan and the master plan, one of the discussions was about moving towards making some zoning bylaw changes. And I think it's the planning board's hope that as part of this process, we will get guidance towards what people think should happen, and then we will pursue inclusionary zoning, mixed use zoning, both, whatever. And they would have to go through a development process, a hearing process before the planning board, and then before the town council.
Could you post that article that you saw?
I saw it online. It was a thing from Channel 5. So if you've got the Channel 5 app, it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, maybe Taylor or Sarah, maybe we can find it in somewhere. We can.
Okay, thank you. As I said, I was trying to tiptoe around that because I didn't want to call out the mall owner or where, but yeah, it's public knowledge. So, but I just didn't want to.
May I share my screen very quickly, Sarah? If you notice, I've been I've been scrambling to get some cost burden data. Thankfully, I just pulled some for Westport recently, so it was good timing. So give me a second. Can everyone see this map?
Now we can.
Yes.
I know it's a little on the fly, it's not very formal, but this is for all those who own. So it does not include renters, unfortunately, but it's for those who own both with and without a mortgage, if they, whatever it may be, how much they spend on their housing. You can see here we have these paler kind of pinky reds are under the 30% that's considered cost burden. This kind of coral color right in the middle is approaching cost burdened. These two are under. And then these two dark and darkest red here are what we're looking at as either, definitely cost burdened or severely cost burdened. So you can kind of see here, the downtown areas along there come up.
Those are census tracts?
These are block groups.
Block groups, I'm sorry.
Here you go. So now that we have some roads up there, I know, again, sorry, it's kind of on the fly, but you can see some of the downtown comes up, these portions going this way into the eastern portion of town. You're seeing some cost burden folks there. So I just wanted to have it so folks could see, I know it came up. So that's kind of what you're looking at. In
That's
terms
great.
of
Could
the
you
location.
take a couple clippings of that
Yeah.
pictures and post it? That's good. So, and then down there south of Route 1 as well is in that color zone too. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
Is that Attleborough?
Yeah, this is I believe
That's
this is
Attleborough.
That's the
road
town
right
line.
here.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's the town line.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about
We
that.
can-
Thank you.
We can kind of dress up the map a little bit more.
Yeah, give me, I just wanted to share it. I'll
No,
stop sharing.
nice job. Thank you.
I'll stop sharing now, but then give me literally 2 minutes and I'll post a PNG for reference for folks in the chat.
Thank you.
And Sarah found the article.
Yes.
Oh, is it I saw that too, Marie, at the mall, Burlington.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Burlington. Yeah, I couldn't think of it from there.
Yeah, that's I'm sure everyone's driven past it. That's a massive mall from the highway. It's just, I mean, that traffic there is wild.
Yeah.
So that's not uncommon. We've seen things down in, another town we worked with down in Florida. They've taken old malls and they've made satellite college campuses. They've turned them into medical centers. They've all kinds of things, reimagining the mall. And, it's not that uncommon. I mean, look at the one in Taunton. They just ripped it down. It was built in, 1990. It didn't even last 30 years. So,
Garden City in Cranston is thriving and they're building a lot of housing around it to take advantage of the.
not familiar with it, but we'll look into it. Is it like an outdoor type of a mall thing?
It's an outdoor type of mall, and interestingly, during the last economic crash is when they poured money into it and renovated it, and it's thriving.
What was that called? Garden City?
Yeah,
Garden
done really
City.
well.
Yeah.
It's
Lisa,
really nice.
do you know where Chapel Hill is in Cranston?
I don't know.
Lisa, do you know where Chapel Hill is? in
Yeah,
Cranston?
that's didn't they that was the old
The Boys Reform School, yeah.
boys. I was trying to think of a nice way to put it. My mom used to call it the bad boys school.
Yeah, they did call it the Bad Boy School. But that on a much larger scale is what I am talking about, and me personally, in terms of the Courtois property, because they have office buildings. They have an area that has, and it's all outdoors, shops, cafes, areas with tables and chairs where you can sit down and have something to eat. They have a grocery store. They have condos. They have apartments. It's very beautifully laid out. It's well maintained. And there are people who I have heard of who live there, work there, shop there, and go home.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
very self-contained.
The only thing is that it seems that if you're going to be kind of building a big thing like that would take advantage of the unused buildings and properties on Route 1, which rather than that become a wasteland.
Again, that's why I think we need to really take a look at, what zoning will allow and what, changes we need to make so that we can encourage people to come, developers to come and do that.
Yeah.
Is there anybody from the zoning board in this planning process so they can kind of hear as things unfold?
Actually, Juliana, the zoning board is an appeals board. They don't develop zoning regulations. The planning board.
They listen to appeals that the planning board is the board that would develop the zoning and have public comments. And two of those members are here tonight, and Marie and Bill.
Great, thank you.
So those are the folks who will bring this back to the planning board they're working with us to listen to this, because they're, once they hear what folks want, then they can kind of move in that direction.
And you can, if you have any suggestions or you come up with a thought about that, you can either post it with this stuff, or you can email Bill or myself, mklarner@attleborough.com, and Bill is W Blaze or B Blaze? B Blaze?
You.
W Blaze at attleborough.com.
All right. Did anybody else have any, looks like we lost a few folks, but anybody else have any ideas? So we got some strategies, looking at, mixed use and inclusionary zoning, that type of thing. Inclusionary zoning would say that, if you're developing, say, 10 units, one of them would have to be affordable, or 100 units, or there's a variety of ways to go about doing that. Laura, were you going to say something?
Juliana,
Oh,
this is
Juliana,
Juliana.
sorry.
One of the thing I saw in, I think it was North Carolina, they had a hotel, I think it was the Hilton complex, where it was hotel rooms on the first, say 10 floors. It was downtown, so obviously it was a big city, but the concept was then the floors above were the condo complex, so that people could buy a bigger unit than just a hotel room and have access again to meals at the restaurants and the ability to kind of use the elevator infrastructure, some of the other hotel infrastructure. So I thought that was a good idea too, in terms of trying to incorporate various techniques.
Actually, I have been hearing more and more lately about both North and South Carolina having some interesting mixed use and developments like you're talking about, and the other ones. A prior planner, Jen, was telling me that she knew someone who had lived in one of them in North Carolina, where it was spread out over, a fair amount of property, but again, it was a mixed use facility.
Interesting. I'm going to say, Taylor, we have I'm going to pivot to you to look at the housing survey. We have another activity here. I'm going to hand it off to Taylor, and she's going to explain that. Some of you may have seen this already, but some of you, it may be new.
Let me just grab it. Right down here. Yeah, so if you did attend our last workshop, you definitely have seen this. Let me get my screen shared. And good. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, we developed this survey right before the land use housing ED workshop. The goal here is it's essentially going to get at what we're already talking about right now, which is, what do you envision North Attleborough's housing to look like in 10 years? Affordable, not affordable, whatever it is we're talking about, just generally speaking. Looking at two kind of main aspects, the density of housing and what we're calling the housing diversity, focus more so on like the mixture of housing. So looking at a good mix of single family condominiums, small multifamily apartments, things of that nature. And so what we did was we devised this super quick survey. It's literally just a 1-question ranking survey. We have a legend right here to kind of show you what all of these maps below mean and kind of what to envision when we're looking at some of these parcels as they're colored. So we've given, I believe, 5 examples of different areas throughout our region, and just these are real neighborhoods that do exist, their densities and diversities, and we've just asked you to rank them 1 through 5, with 1 being the most desirable and 5 being the least desirable. So for example, here we have a low density, medium diversity neighborhood where you see a good portion of single family housing, a smaller portion of condominiums, a very small portion of small multifamily, etc. And this goes all the way down to medium density, low diversity, where it's pretty much entirely single family homes with 1 small multifamily grouping in. And then you start to get into more diverse housing stocks, higher densities, all the way to this highest density, highest diversity, where you see a very mixed housing stock with a high density of housing. And so we just want you to rank them. You can either click and drag them Or, I mean, so they'll reorder too as you click and drag them, but you can also choose to just number them and then they'll reorder accordingly. But whatever is easiest for you, you can just kind of go through and give them a ranking. And then once you're done at the bottom, you'll just press OK and then done. Anyone have questions about that? Awesome. So I will link that also in the chat so it's easily accessible for folks. But yeah, we wanted it to be quick. I'm not exactly sure, Eric, the timeline of this being open. I think we're probably going to keep it open. I would say probably at least 3 weeks after this. I don't think we'll probably close it before the second workshop since we will be focusing on kind of the feedback that we hear from this workshop and what we hear on this survey. But we will also.
There's no tight deadline.
Yeah.
You know, we hope to share it with as many people as possible. Again, because it's feedback. We're here as the town's administrative assistant. So,
right.
You know, we have an idea, but we really need to hear from the town on a lot of these issues. And, you know, we'll post this and we'll have a little summary of our meeting here tonight. And we need folks to, you know, to contribute, to hear what they have to say. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's extremely important. Did anybody else have any other questions? So, you know, and if you could share this with your neighbors or, you know, we're always looking to gather more input, reach out to more people. I know it's tough on Zoom. I know that, you know, the next workshop will be in August. Hopefully that can be in person. You know, when we are able to meet in person, we usually do all of this in person. So we'll definitely be going back to in-person meetings and we'll be working and hopefully we can have a bit more attendance. I'm sure that we'll keep some type of online component for the folks who want to contribute that way. Yeah. Any other ideas you have for outreach, we'd be more than happy to. Again, once we are in person, we'll be able to go to different events and reach out to people that way too. So, you know, definitely the second half of the plan will definitely be in person.
Right. This is Juliana. That's what I was going to say. Even if you had big poster boards at the supermarket and had, you know, sessions or the senior housing or the, you know, senior center or downtown and just had the maps up or had the critical questions you wanted and somebody just making tick marks to get the answers or logging them in electronically, but the people are, you know, almost like that brown paper exercise around the room where you're getting the feedback in real time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've done that in the past for sure.
Yeah, I think with the way public health is going and the increasing rate of vaccinations and stuff, the in-person and pop-up workshops that we used to do are looking more and more realistic for folks. So, I mean,
right.
it would be great to go to where people are. That's usually
Yeah.
what I like to do.
And yeah, we've done to, you know, Little League days and all that kind of stuff before. So I know there's usually a lot of people there. So we try to go to where the people are and we'll do that again. And we'll rely on the folks here in our master plan committee to help us guide us to those places.
Well, I don't know if you saw it, but North Attleborough is going to be having a farmer's market in the park in front of Town Hall on Wednesdays, starting, I want to say towards the end of June. I would think that would be an awesome place to kick off that sort of activity with. You could have, you know, we could arrange for you guys to have a booth and table and do all that stuff for you. And if it's a hot night, we'll have a cooler full of water or whatever.
That'd be great.
That sounds perfect. Those are the types of things we're looking for and going to where the people are and have the posters and just chat and that type of thing.
Okay.
We're coming up on 8 o'clock. Did anybody else have any questions or concerns or wanted to add anything? You can always reach us after the fact, or if you're looking for other data, I'm happy to supply that.
I think not a comment, just a comment that what I'm getting out of this is that everyone seems to be on board with more of the mixed use style development. But what I'm taking out of it is that right now our bylaws are so rigid,
Right.
We're not affording anybody that availability to do so. I think we need to spend more time on the bylaws and trying to develop ways to attract that type of development if that's what we're really looking for.
Well, super. Thanks, everybody. Great job facilitating, and I appreciate your allowing me to speak and give some feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
contribution. Appreciate it. Everyone have a good night. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
folks.
It was a good session. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Dan,
good one.
Bill, Lisa, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks again.
Good night,
Thanks, take
everybody.
care.
Thanks,
You too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.